Welcome to the Even Better podcast, where your host, Sinikka Waugh of Your Clear Next Step, brings you exciting content about making communities better by helping people get even better at work.
Well, thank you so much to each of you for joining us on today's podcast. This is Sinikka Waugh with the Even Better podcast, and we are so delighted that you're here with us today. And I am really excited. I know by now you get that enthusiastic is my default setting, but no, really, I am super excited today to spend some time with Kay Arvidson. Kay has been a longtime friend and has been part of the Your Clear Next Step journey for all of its years. And we've been through a lot together, Kay and I, and a lot in our careers and lives separately, and have just really continued to treasure that friendship. And Kay has been a coach with us for a couple of different intervals over the course of Your Clear Next Step. She has primarily focused on helping individuals get better in their own ability to present their own skills, their own resume, to interview well. And in her career, Kay has been a coach focused on leading change. Her background includes project management and business analysis for e-commerce applications, training and website development for state and local governments, and coaching individuals through career changes. Kay has a bachelor's in psychology from the University of Iowa and an MBA from Georgia State University in Atlanta. And I can tell you that Kay has a wonderful sense of humor and a delightful laugh and an ability to lift the mood of any room that she's in. So Kay, thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. We are so glad to have you.
Well, thank you, Sinikka. It's delightful to be here, but I got to tell you, I'm just a little bit nervous. This is the first time I've ever done a podcast.
Kay, I have known you for years. You are not prone to nervousness. That surprises me a little bit.
Well, I remember back in many a day that I used to get so very, very nervous when I would go to job interviews. I think it's calmed down over the years, but boy, I would be so nervous. And then as I went through my career, I realized that I've got so much more influence in the interview process than I ever realized before. And that changed everything. And you know where it begins? It begins with the verbal resume.
Oh, that is lovely. So you talk about this verbal resume, Kay. This is a thing that is part of the featured product offerings that you offer through Your Clear Next Step. It's also part of things that you've been talking about for years is the verbal resume. And not everyone understands what that verbal resume is. Can you kind of shape that for us a little bit? Tell us about that verbal resume a little bit.
You bet, Sinikka. It is a couple of minutes that you spend at the beginning of an interview or as soon as you can insert into the interview that talks about who you are. It positions yourself the way you want your prospective employer to see you. It lets you shape your skills and your abilities in a very short summary that describes who you are and gives the person you're talking to some ideas about how they can continue the conversation.
So you said a second ago that you realized you had more influence than you thought in an interview. So this verbal resume, if we think about what influence is our ability to get the other person to want to do what we want them to do. And so through this verbal resume, do we have the ability to influence the other person to want to hire us?
Well, absolutely. We've got that ability. What we have is the opportunity to present ourselves in a way that is going to represent our skill base, as well as what the company needs, the person you're talking to, and really be able to work those things together in the skills and the abilities that you have. Okay, now here's an example. All right, you might look at my personal resume and somebody might say, gee, she worked in the business sector, she worked in nonprofits, she worked in the government sector. I really don't see any continuity here. But in my verbal resume, what I say is, my career is focused on starting new things to expand market opportunities. Things like new products, new services, new divisions, new nonprofit corporations, new for-profit businesses, new online applications. Bottom line, I lead change.
Oh, look at that. I love the way you shifted that around. So to many of us, what we might have thought in the first place was a sort of, oh, wow, there's a lot of things on my resume. Is that something that will hinder me? Is that something that will hold me back? You've just used a couple of seconds. And really, it didn't seem like it took you all that long, but you used a couple of seconds to reposition or to position the variety of experience on your resume in a way that really zeroes in on what you want them to know about you.
Absolutely. That's what's key. This is all part of personal branding. That's what we call our services at Your Clear Next Step. Personal branding. It's putting value in what you bring to the table for an employer and finding a way to be able to customize that conversation every time you have that conversation so you can focus on whatever you bring of value, as well as recognizing what the person across the table from you, the prospective employer, what that person is needing as well.
Absolutely. And I love how you've reminded us that it's not just about what I want to say, but it's also about what that other person wants to or needs to hear and needs to learn. Kay, one of the, as we've been preparing for this conversation, the structure of our Your Clear Next Step, Even Better podcast, they tend to zero around 4 or 5 things, right? 5 elements you didn't know, or 5 tips that you can apply in such and such a situation. So we had been talking about in advance 5 things that you might not know about your verbal resume. And I think we needed to start absolutely with a clarification of what is the verbal resume. But let's dive into some of those other, that if maybe that first thing is, how would you describe that? It's an opportunity to do something. What's that first thing with a verbal resume? It's the opportunity to do what?
It's an opportunity to present yourself the way you want to be perceived, the way you want to be viewed. So in my case, I wanted to present myself as a person who leads change, a person who starts to create new things that can help expand market opportunities. So that's the light that worked best for my skill set. And each interview that you go to has a little different focus because of who you're talking to, what the job description is, what the company is needing, and what you bring to the table. So there's an opportunity to structure that verbal resume, tweak it a little bit every time you talk with someone, so you're bringing to the top, to the surface, your best skills to meet their needs.
Absolutely. And I love your reality that it's not just my best skills, it's my best skills to meet the needs of that employer or that potential employer who's sitting across from me.
Absolutely. There is so much to think about and so much to do in preparation for an interview, which is something that I hope we talk about. If not today, we can talk about it in our next podcast. So many of the ways that a person can influence the interview process in addition to the verbal resume. But right now, one of the other things that this resume can do for you is the verbal resume. It can give you a springboard for more questions for the interviewer to ask. Like, in my example about how I lead change and I start new things, well, someone might say, well, tell me how you lead change, or tell me about a business that you started, or tell me why did you move into working in the government sector to create online services and applications. When you highlight your skills in the verbal resume, it opens the door for more conversation about those subjects that you highlight about yourself. Nice.
So it's really that springboard. It's really helping manage the kinds of questions they might want to ask. So let me play this forward a little bit. So imagine that we're in an interview situation and I am not really sure where you're going to come at me from interview questions, but if I tee up my verbal resume in a way that is interesting and that might spark questions, then there's a better chance that you can ask me questions along that theme. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's key to the process.
Nice. Okay, so we're thinking about five things you might not know about your verbal resume. And, as an introductory, the first thing we talked about is the fact that some people just don't even know that there is a verbal resume or what they're supposed to do. And I think as an employer in the past, I've used that phrase, well, tell me your story, right? Tell me a little bit about yourself, or in those kinds of conversations. But this is really your chance to present yourself in the best light. That was your first tip. And then the second one is a thing you might not know is that it's a springboard for questions that you are already then prepared or ready to answer. So instead of questions that might come out of the blue and you don't have a framework for them, if we use this verbal resume right, then it's a chance for you to sort of control or anticipate, influence, if you will, what questions that interviewer is going to answer. Have you seen this work in interview settings? How you gave your own example about change, for example, but have you heard with the folks that you work with in the past or seen it happen in other interview situations that you can share?
Oh, it absolutely works. It's an interesting thing. The time it worked the best for me is when I sat down and the person across from me at the table said, "Tell me about your verbal resume." that sort of really fit the bill on that one. But, that moved us into the conversation. And then I've talked with many people that say that this gives an opportunity to highlight some of their better skills and focus on the things that work the best in the interview process and get those ideas on the table that match your skills with the prospective employer's needs. So it's a two-way street. And a lot of times I think we don't recognize that because, well, you go into a job interview, you really want it, you love it, it's something that you've worked hard for, you might be a little on the nervous side, those sorts of things. So it's a great opportunity to set the scene for how you are and what you do and how you can help the person you're talking to and help them with the solutions to the problems that they have. You find a lot of information about the job that you can put into your verbal resume when you take a look at the job description that the company has. It really gives you an opportunity to focus on understanding more about what the company needs and how to position yourself to fit that needs. That's another important aspect of the verbal resume.
You bet. So as we had a chance to prepare for this a little in advance, and one of the topics was this really this third thing that people might not know about the verbal resume is it demonstrates your understanding of what the company needs. And I gotta set aside a second, and then I'll let you chime in on this one. But my aside is the frustration that I've experienced as an employer, as a business owner, interviewing with people who spend maybe their opening remarks of the conversation or maybe their entire interview talking about themselves, which, right, that's what you're supposed to do in an interview. But I have no sense from that conversation that they know anything about us as an employer or us as a company or how those wonderful skills that they're describing might fit into our environment. So if you're saying demonstrates that your understanding of what the company needs is something you can do in your verbal resume, talk us through, like, how does that work?
Well, let's say you're taking a look at the job description. That's one of the key places that you begin this research. So perhaps let's say it's a project management position or something of that nature. And so they're describing the kind of work that needs to be done, which gives you an opportunity to focus on the things you may have done that accomplish the same things. You can also go to the company's website. You can talk to people who work there. You can get an understanding through their annual reports where the organization is focused. What are their goals? What are they doing? What's happening in the marketplace? And you're talking to someone who is looking for a skill set that's comparable to your own. That's the reason that you're sitting across the table from each other to begin with. So you know that there's some similarities there, and you do your best in preparation for the resume to recognize what the company needs and to be able to structure your skill sets to meet those. Does that make sense?
It does. That absolutely makes sense. So if I'm heeding your advice here and I'm sitting in an interview and I've used my verbal resume, I'm talking about not just my skills, but specifically the skills that might be interesting for that employer. And I'm dovetailing them into a statement that indicates that I know something about that employer and I know something about the work that they're doing and how I can help. Is that right?
Absolutely. That's very key in this whole process, is to build that bond between you and the prospective company and you and the person who's across from you on the other side of the table. I mean, it's a process that builds the beginning of your relationship.
Oh, that's a really nice way to look at it. How many people do we know that go through interviews and they're just going to survive them? Whether they're the interviewee or the interviewer, that they're going hoping they can get through this or muddle through or make it through. And I love that you've repositioned this. This verbal resume allows you to begin the relationship with that person across the table from you. Oh, that's really lovely, Kay.
A lot of the ideas that come here today are from when I was on the other side of the table. I was the person who was doing the interviewing, and I had people coming and sitting across from me who were wanting a job. That opened my eyes to the kinds of information that can be shared in an interview that really helps the decision maker, who's going to be the one who says, yes, you're the right person for this job.
Absolutely. So your experiences from your own personal career and your own anecdotes as interviewing for jobs, but also shaped by your extensive experience conducting interviews with potential candidates.
Absolutely. It's a two-way process. The old adage used to be it's a two-way street, but there really is a relationship that is established in the interview, and that's where so much can grow in the job opportunity that you're wanting to have, the job opportunity you're seeking, the job need that the person on the other side of the table is looking to fill.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay, so we're talking about 5 things that you may not know or that our listeners might not know about their verbal resume. We're here with Kay Arvidson. Our first one is you may not know that your verbal resume is an opportunity to present yourself in your best light. The second one is it's a springboard to the questions that you are prepared to answer. So it's really setting the stage for those future questions so that you can manage that part of the conversation. It's a way to demonstrate your understanding of what the employer or what the hiring company needs. Let's take a look at the fourth one. We had a chance to prepare some of this in advance, and it's a positive way to explain any gaps in your resume. What do you mean by that, Kay?
There are times when there may be a gap in a person's resume, and it may be because you went back to school. It may be because you decided to relocate. It may be because there was a family member in need and you had to focus on someone else besides yourself for a period of time. If you have any kind of a gap in your resume, the verbal resume is a wonderful opportunity to explain what that situation was, why you made the decision to focus on another need before you decided to focus on your job search, and put all of that in a very, very positive light.
Nice. So perhaps, though, is it possible that I've been employed for continuously all of that time, but maybe for 2 or 3 years, I wasn't a project manager, or for 2 or 3 years, I wasn't in the particular field that I'm trying to get back into now, or for 5 years or 8 years, there was some gap in, maybe not gap in my employment, but gap in the industry or in the field. Could I use that verbal resume as a way there as well?
Oh, absolutely. That's a wonderful way to take a look at something like that. And you can position it, you can describe it in a number of different ways. Me personally, I worked in economic development for a period of time. I worked trying to help people start businesses and start new things. And then I decided it was time to practice what I preach. And that's when I moved to the other side of the fence and started to create new businesses and new organizations and new divisions. So, I was changing the areas where I was working in, but there was a logical reason that I did that. So it's a wonderful opportunity to enhance the understanding of your skill sets, to contribute that change to the value that you bring to the table, and to show how you are the most valuable candidate because you have more perspective than just one field to bring to the table.
Oh, that's a nice way to put that. So within these tips of the verbal resume, and the verbal resume, now we're getting a very clear picture. This is that part of the interview process where you kind of get to introduce yourself and tell your story, if you will, tell present yourself in that best possible light, introduce topics that you're going to want to answer questions on later, demonstrate that you have done some homework and you've done some research and you understand what the company needs and how you can help support that. And then use that conversation to address any gaps that might be on there and put them in the most favorable way. You've got a 5th tip on here, a 5th thing that people might not know about the verbal resume. And that's the chance to share why you want that job. Now, you've got a story in mind. I'm sure you do. Somewhere in there's a story in mind about either someone who forgot to tell you that they wanted that job, or someone who made it so abundantly clear that they wanted that job, you couldn't help but hire them. Talk us through that. How do you use your verbal resume there?
Well, this is the part that's also highly customized for the person you're talking to and the company that you're talking to, because it really is an opportunity to tell them why you are there today. I'm here today because of this organization, that I believe in its philosophy. I believe in its mission. I know where its focus is going, and it's part of what I want to accomplish for you and for me. Or you say something in the closing of the verbal resume about what this opportunity brings to you, what it brings to both of you. Opportunity is good for the company, why that opportunity is good for you. This is a good way to close the verbal resume. It's a way to customize the conversation for the position you're seeking and for the company that you're talking to. And it's personal. It usually starts by saying something like, I'm here today because, and then you continue that sentence by bringing in the appropriate information about your skills, about where the company is going, about why this is a perfect match to help the person you're talking to reach their goals, to help the company reach their goals. It's a personal way to close the verbal resume, but it also is a focus on the future of your relationship together and how you can help this company and how this company can help you.
Oh, that's really, really lovely. I can think of times as an interviewer that it would be, in fact, most of them, right? It would be lovely to have someone sitting across the table from you saying, hey, I'm here because this hiring me would be good for both of us. I'm here because this particular opportunity is the right fit for me and it's the right fit for you as an employer and as a hiring company. Just really solidifying that beginning of a relationship where we are in this together and where it's not one-sided. So many interviews wind up feeling so one-sided. I have experienced as the hiring manager, just encounter far too many interviews, I think, whether they're college interns or whether they're people seeking part-time or full-time or consulting arrangements with me, that the interview gets so focused on what they want and what they can contribute, but it's really in a focus that is so centric on them that this reminder to close the interview by pointing out how it's good for both of us and how we both win, just that feels really, really lovely.
When you're on the other side of the table, when you're the person who's doing the interviewing, you've got a need and you've got a situation, and it may be far more urgent than anyone else recognizes. So finding a comfort level and a confidence level between you and the person that's being interviewed is a very valuable resource towards helping a person get into a position, to get into the job, to win the opportunity that you're looking for when you sit down in that interview to begin with.
Absolutely. So, Kay, in a unique way, many of our podcasts are with people that we have, that I've met along the way, or people that we collaborate on some projects here and there, or people that we know or that I've worked with as customers or as clients. In this case, this is kind of unique because you also have the opportunity to share just a little bit more about the product offering that you are bringing to the table through your Clear Next Step, and verbal resume is obviously a piece of that. Can you take a couple of minutes and kind of talk through the services that you provide?
Oh, thanks. I would love to. Absolutely. We call these personal branding services because it's all about presenting the individual, the person that we are working with, presenting you in the best possible light for where you're wanting to move with your career. So the first thing we do is we work through your resume and we show a resume that brings value. Now, here's an example from my own perspective. One of the things that I did was manage and develop tax forms for the state of Iowa. Okay, that might be a statement on a resume, but if I were to say in that statement that I developed over 450 tax forms that generated more than $8 billion a year in revenue for the state of Iowa, okay, that puts a little more oomph into that statement. It emphasizes that I was given an extreme responsibility that was vital to the ongoing operations of the state of Iowa. So, when you work on your resume, you work on looking at those bullet points and presenting value in the work that you have done. So that's one of the things that we do. Now, a second thing is the verbal resume, like we talked about today, and worked with our clients so they understand how to customize that resume for every situation that comes to you, every opportunity that comes to you. And the third thing that we do is we work on the structure of your follow-up communication. Perhaps it's an email, perhaps it's a note, perhaps it's a phone call, but it's an opportunity to follow up after the interview and pitch your value as an employee to this company. And that's an opportunity that many people miss. It's also an opportunity that you can help to identify and structure when you're in the process of the interview. And that's part of what we talk about too. What kind of questions can you be asking to find out what the real need is, what the real opportunity is, and how you can fill that. So there are many aspects to our services that can help you take advantage of that wonderful opportunity that you've just found and that is perfect for the next step, your clear next step in your career. One more thing I want to mention is that we call these on-demand services because quite often you see an opportunity and you need to move on it quickly. And you may not have everything ready. You may not have that resume updated. You may not have your verbal resume in place. And so we're here to help you when you need it and to respond quickly to whatever the situation may be that is your opportunity for the future.
Thank you, Kay. So as we're closing up our conversation on the verbal resume, there's one more point that I want to get back to on the verbal resume, and this is part of the services that you're providing through your Clear Next Step. But even to our listeners, as we think about the verbal resume, all those tips that you shared, things people might not know, that it's the opportunity to present yourself in your best light, that it's a springboard for questions you're ready to answer, that it demonstrates your understanding of what the company needs, that it's a positive way to address any gaps in your resume, and that it's really a wonderful way to share why you want this job and begin that relationship with the person across the table from you. But as I look at that, the thought that kept coming through my mind over and over and over again is this stuff doesn't just magically happen in an interview conversation, right? I mean, there's some prep that has to go into that. Is that fair?
Oh, absolutely. It's very important to do the preparation that you need and show that you have done the preparation. It demonstrates that you're really interested in this conversation. You're really interested in this job opportunity, that you have taken the time and recognized the value that is a reciprocal relationship between you and your employer.
Lovely. And I've heard you say a couple of times that the verbal resume is something that gets adjusted every time. It's not like a script that you memorize and then recite sort of by rote every time you get in the room with someone, right?
That's right. There are components of it that you want to draw upon because they reflect well on how you do the work you do and how to describe the work you do. But it's also something that's customized. It flows with the opportunity. And that's an important aspect to realize. Your resume can do that too. Nothing is static anymore. You can focus on the introduction in your resume. You can focus on some of the skills that you highlight and bring those forward because of the situation you're talking about, because of the job description that you're working with, because of the company that you're talking to. This is much more of a fluid process. I remember hearing years and years and years ago that people would create a resume and they would print 100 copies and they would send them out all over the place. And those days are gone. This is the time for a highly customized approach to a job opportunity. And that's how you win.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you, Kay. So one of the things that we like to close with in this Even Better podcast is what's making you, so I'm going to ask you the question I ask everyone, what's making you even better right now, Kay?
Well, that's an interesting question right now because I'm going through a lot of change, Sinikka, a lot of change in my life. And it seems that a person can forget that change can bring a tremendous amount of opportunity, that it can be a very positive thing. Yeah, it can be scary and it can be stressful and it certainly is different and it's also irrevocable. So, those aspects about change are very true. But the fact that it opens your eyes to see things in a different light, that it creates an opportunity for you to grow as an individual, for you to put your best effort forward in a totally different way and know that you can do that and you can succeed at that. Those are some of the lessons about change that can make you even better. And those are the sorts of things that I'm seeing again now.
Oh, thank you, Kay. Well, Kay, it has been a joy to have you as part of this podcast. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's been a pleasure to visit with you, Sinikka. Thank you so much.
And to all of our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. And this has been Sinikka Waugh with the Even Better podcast, and we're wishing you a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for tuning in today. The Even Better podcast will be back with more content soon. But in the meantime, subscribe to our podcast or check out our website at yourclearnextstep.com for more information. See you next episode.